Take a trip with me through the history of FromSoftware. We're going back before Dark Souls, before their foray into survival horror with Kuon, and even before Armored Core, which, let's be honest, all of us have played at some point, either from the Pizza Hut demo discs or the newest release in the series. We're going all the way back to 1994 to their first entry into gaming with Kingsfield. We're not going to go too into depth here, but take this first-person boomer shooter with swords instead of guns and strip away all of its action aspects. Take what's left, slow it down, and make the setting a creepy haunted boat, and we're left with Echo Knight 1. Today we're going to go down the rabbit hole of the Echo Knight series and see how it gave rise to games like Amnesia, Fatal Frame, and The Vanishing of Ethan Carter. Developed by FromSoftware and released in 1998 for the PlayStation, stands as a testament to the enduring appeal of atmospheric horror and narrative-driven gameplay in the realm of video games. This adventure horror game takes players on a journey through a haunted boat, intertwining elements of exploration, puzzle solving, and supernatural encounters to create a uniquely immersive experience. At its core, Echo Knight is a game that eschews traditional horror game tropes in favor of a more subtle and atmospheric approach. Players assume the role of Richard Osman, who finds himself shot through time and space to a boat where Richard discovers it is haunted by ghosts, each with their own tragic stories waiting to be uncovered. The game's narrative unfolds as players interact with these spectral entities, piecing together clues and solving puzzles that reveal the boat's dark secrets. One of the standout features of Echo Knight is its emphasis on exploration and environmental storytelling. The boat serves as a sprawling, interconnected environment filled with hidden passages, locked doors, and eerie corridors. As players delve deeper into the boat's depths, they encounter ghosts whose stories are intricately woven into the fabric of the game's narrative. This non-linear approach to storytelling encourages players to explore every nook and cranny, rewarding curiosity with bits of lore and deeper insight into the mysteries that surround them. The gameplay mechanics of Echo Knight are designed to complement its atmospheric storytelling. Unlike traditional horror games that rely on combat, Echo Knight challenges players to navigate the boat stealthily, avoiding confrontation with ghosts while uncovering clues that advance the story. This emphasis on evasion and puzzle solving heightens the sense of tension and vulnerability, immersing players in a world where every shadow and sound could hold a clue or a lurking threat. From a technical standpoint, Echo Knight leverages the capabilities of the PlayStation to deliver a visually and audibly immersive experience. The game's graphics, while dated by today's standards, effectively convey the eerie atmosphere of the boat with its dimly lit rooms and unsettling ambient sounds. The haunting soundtrack further enhances the game's atmospheres, punctuating moments of suspense and discovery with subtle yet impactful music clues. Echo Knight's legacy extends beyond its initial release, influencing subsequent titles in the horror genre with its emphasis on atmosphere, narrative depth, and psychological tension. In an interview with the lead developers of the game, Kaneko, the main programmer, Nabishima, who was in charge of planning and setting, Watanabe, who was in charge of graphics, and Sagawa, the sound engineer, they stated they wanted to try something simple but different, which is why combat was removed. There's no guns or weapons, but light switches. We have to use wits to progress through the game. They also wanted to steer away from the settings of most other games at the time, like hospitals or labs, and make the game take place aboard a ship. During their development process, the Titanic movie came out, which they said helped give them some layout information for the construction of the engine room. The coolest thing to me was the different amount of footstep sounds and light switches there were in the game. Sagawa said there was at least 10 different footstep sounds for whatever type of material was being walked on. All of their hard work led to an incredibly immersive game due to its somewhat slow pacing and puzzles that make you explore everything and talk to everyone. Before we jump in, I'm going to explain a little bit about the gameplay. First thing I have to say is the controls took a lot of getting used to. L1 and R1 were strafe while L2 and R2 were look up and down. The D-pad provides the traditional tank controls of forward and back and look left and right. But I mean, who am I kidding? I instantly remapped those so I could just use the sticks instead of the triggers, which honestly made the game feel a lot better and much smoother. And the whole premise of this game is to save some ghosties by granting them their final wishes so that they can move on and give us their astral pieces, which we use at the end of the game for a little surprise. Along the way, we get flung into the past to receive certain items that we may need and get some backstory on the main characters or ghosts we're trying to help. As previously mentioned, combat is stripped down in this. So while we're on the boat, we find some hostile ghosts. The only way to stop them is by turning the lights on in that room. The game's pacing is physically slow, but the story is continuously moving, so I'm going to try my best to only touch on the major things in the interest of time, since the game was roughly 5 hours of walking and about 1 hour of story dialogue. But I promise to do my best to make sure everything's touched on, so without further ado, let's hop into the first entry of Echo Night. Our game starts in 1937, somewhere in America, when our character gets a letter from his father, Henry Osmond, which is the first letter he's received since he's left home. The letter contains a key. We're then interrupted by a phone call by the police who want to ask us some questions about our father. The officer drives us to our father's house, which has recently burned down, but there's no trace of Henry anywhere. When we enter the house, we gain control of Richard and are left to explore our father's house. During this time, we find a winding key near some rubble. When we make our way into Henry's bedroom, we find a grandfather clock. We unlock the clock with the key we received in the mail and use the winding key to set the time, which then moves the clock, revealing a small crawl space behind it. When we enter it, we find a book which launches us somewhere else entirely. These jumps are flashbacks and occur throughout the entire game. But this one we get a cutscene of a man boarding a train. Shortly after, we gain control of someone on the train, which I believe is Richard, since in some of the flashbacks they speak to us and give us items that we carry outside of the flashback. We explore the cars a little bit, and when we try to return, we see the man who boarded the train enter a car we came out of and lock the new door behind him. We go into the car he just came out of and find that the employee is on the floor and a crank lies next to him. We take this crank up to the roof of the locked car to open a hatch and witness the young man accosting the older gentleman, who is ready to take out his granddaughter if the young man doesn't leave. We get a lot of info here, but the main thing is that the old man seems to be the bad guy in this whole situation, as he shoots the young man and leaves. The young man stands up and talks to the little girl. He tells her that her grandpa is possessed and to keep the blue stone for protection. This little girl is revealed to be Kreia Rockwell, and the young man is none other than our father. Henry leaves, and shortly after, the old man follows him. When we go to follow them, we find our father telling the old man that he's possessed by the red stone he carries before leaping off the train to survive. We're then flung back to Henry's house and go into his basement. Here we get a real taste of how some of the puzzles are. This one's pretty obvious, but still a little subtle. We look at this painting and make sure that the statues in the room mirror that of the painting. We can interact with the statue and slowly move them because they probably weigh like 200 pounds, and I don't think we're built like Eddie Hall. But once that's done, the painting changes to a boat and we skidoo into it.
Who are you? What are you doing here? Come with me. You shall not leave. You mustn't go outside of this room. Is that understood?
Now that we're on board a ship named the Orpheus, and the captain's left, we finally embark on our journey to free the ghosts. I'll briefly explain how each of these ghosts are freed when we reach them, because there's 26 in total. When we try to leave the captain's cabin, we're ambushed by a little girl ghost. But saved by someone turning the lights on, which is our explanation of how to defend ourselves aboard this ship.
It's the light. They're not fond of light.
When we find another friendly ghost near the railing, he's sulking over his lost love interest. This flings us into our first time hop the ship has to offer. Here we see the sailor when he was still alive, and his fiancée who has sadly lost the engagement ring. But since this is all just a huge game to Richard, we ignore their problems and ride the carousel. While on it, we see a faint glimmer on the ground that when examined happens to be the lost engagement ring. When we return to the sailor's fiancée, we get a cutscene. Chasing after the sailor, we find the fiancé who was too late. She gives us the ring, and we're sent back to the Orpheus to deliver the ring.
Oh my God. How could I have forgotten about her? Forgive me, Christina. Thank you for telling me. I will go to her now.
Once the sailor disappears, we receive our first astral piece. In a nearby room, we find a ghost in the dark, who also sends us back.
I locked the door, but she'll still come. Why?
In this memory, we get some rubber gloves right before the sailor gets ambushed by the little girl ghost. We can use these gloves in a little bit to restore power to this room. Until then, we explore a little more and come across a room near the fuse box that also has the little girl ghost. But in this room, the lights don't turn on. Eventually, I muster up the courage to go back in there, avoiding the ghost to get some wire cutters. We can use these wire cutters back in the captain's room to open a locked dresser.
I have been waiting waiting for you. Come here.
Inside the dresser we find a book with a comment on it, which flings us into another area. I'm not sure if this is the past or another dimension, but inside we meet a creepy blind guy who explains a little bit about the astral pieces.
So how goes your journey aboard the ship? It seems pretty fun. You don't have to be scared. I just possess an alien power. What's this? You have something interesting. I speak of the sphere you possess. Will you give it to me?
Now he doesn't say too much about it, but if we deliver all 26 to him, we unlock 2 additional endings to the game. In exchange for each piece we deliver, we receive holy water, which can reverse the effect of some of the ghost enemies' attacks, as well as heal us a little bit.
But it has the power to cure you when you are possessed. Oh, I almost forgot.
When we're done talking to him, we try to leave, and he gives us what appears to be half of the blue stone that was just given to Kreia a bit ago. Back on the Orpheus, we pick up the wire we just cut and head over back to the fuse box. After many times of getting electrocuted, I finally realized I had to equip the gloves, not just use them. Now that my big brain has figured this out, we try again, and successfully, in video game logic, use a tiny wire as a fuse. Making our way back up to the ghost in the dark room, he's thrilled he's safe in the light and passes on.
She won't come here anymore.
Dropping a piece and an iron key. Outside, the captain tells us everyone died during a storm and asked for our help before passing on and leaving us another piece.
Help us. Help this ship.
We use the key we just got on a door down by the fuse box and enter the passenger quarters. In this hallway we find 4 ghosts. The first one we encounter wants us to mix a drink like his friend Ed used to. So we go into the room next to him and we find a painting by E.M. This painting is of a man with an axe and 2 snakes. We go behind the bar and find some bottles, and fill the cup once from the man bottle, once from the axe bottle, and twice from the snake bottle. Delivering the drink back, we learn we need some metals to release Ed.
I threw away one of the metals in the ventilation shaft.
We receive another astral piece and one of the metals we need. Further down the hall we enter one of the rooms of the ghost twins. The first one says that they're ghosts because of the demon.
It's because of that demon that...
When we go to the other twins' room, we're told to leave and get attacked by a different ghost.
Go!
When we go back to the first twin, she tells us everything is the same between the two, meaning their rooms are mirrored. So we block the door the ghost came through in the first bedroom, and it also moves it to block it in the second bedroom. When we do this, the second twin also tells us to save Ed before dropping an astral piece and a medal.
The man we trapped inside that room.
When we return to the first twin, she recognizes the blue stone and says that Kreia is waiting for us.
It's the same as what Kreia had. So you must have been the one Kreia was waiting for.
She then passes on, leaving another astral piece and a medal as well. The last medal is in an air duct that we have to move some stuff around to be able to access. When we manage to get into the duct, we find our final medal. We can then go back and use these medals on the toy mannequins in order to open a secret door leading to Ed. Talking to him, he says he saw the birth of the demon and passes on, dropping a brass key and an astral piece. Making our way to the end of this hallway, we use the brass key on a door that leads us to the little ghost girl, which we immediately just say nope to and leave. When we're back in the hallway, a friendly ghost tells us that that little girl is stuck in a hole and we're flung into another flashback inside of a cave. In this cave we have to move around a few minecarts that crash through rocks and go over some gaps. In the end of the cave, we find a miner employed by the Rockwell Company, and that many accidents happened in this mine, and that his daughter went missing too. We pick up his daughter's doll, and he manages to mine through what he was swinging his pickaxe at, revealing his daughter. When we return to the ship with the doll, we go back to Claudia's ghost and give her the doll to calm her spirit and finally be rid of her.
My doll. Father gave this to me.
When we enter an adjacent room, we find a nice dress suit that we'll need a bit later in the game. But we're then knocked out and taken to another part of the ship. When we wake up, we get the runaround from a ghost doctor with a guilty conscience about poisoning Sir William.
Sir William, I don't know anything.
When we open his cabinet, we're flung into a memory of the doctor. But when we try to open the drawer near him, he chases us out. Back on the ship, we wait a little bit, and the ghost doctor eventually leaves. With him gone, we go back to the cabinet, and he isn't there in the flashback either. Opening his drawer this time yields us a prescription. Back on the ship yet again, we give the prescription to the ghost doctor, and he recognizes it as Sir William's before running off. Now that we're free to leave this room, we're ambushed by another ghost, trapping us in this section of the ship until we deal with her. When we find the ghost doctor again in the theater, he says he killed Sir Arthur. Across the hall from the theater, we find a little casino. If we win in roulette and blackjack, we release 3 spirits to gain their astral pieces. I spent a lot of time here saving and reloading until the RNG gods blessed me in the roulette game, but blackjack was way easier. We just need to win enough to double our chip count from 100 to 200, which didn't take more than about 7 hands. After winning both games, we take our astral pieces and leave. Across the hall there are constellations on the wall. When we observe them, we find one light bulb that doesn't light up and interact with it to turn on the hall lights and make the bad ghost go away. When she disappears, she leaves behind a pool of poison on the floor. A small child walks towards us, saying he saw Sir William stab Sir Arthur and that he cannot find his mother. So we take the vinyl we found in the theater and use it to bring the child to his mother, granting us 2 astral pieces and a key to the chest in the room. This chest contains a reel of film and a gear. Back in the theater, when we give the film to the engineer, he loads up the projector and passes on.
This will be the last show, as I've promised.
We take his piece and go see the doctor below. When we try to talk to him, we get to watch the film we just loaded up, which starts out like some Three Stooges film, which quickly devolves into Old Man Rockwell stabbing people with his redstone dagger. This video gives us a glimpse into what might possibly be keeping these spirits here.
It wasn't.
The doctor
my
realizes he didn't kill Arthur and
fault.
passes on, leaving us a piece and a cabinet key. Using the cabinet key in his room, we get an antidote that we can use on the poison pool in this area. At this point, we're over halfway done, having acquired 14 of the 26 astral pieces. Moving on, we put on the dress suit, and we're let into a fancy dining area with Arthur Rockwell and his wife. Speaking to them, we learn a little bit of what's going on here and who they are.
Arthur Rockwell.
I'm Hilda Rockwell.
You should have already witnessed the reason we are here. Yes, it was as if that red stone possessed him.
He tried to kill us and succeeded because of that knife.
A long time ago, beyond that painting, fate was determined.
When we enter the flashback, we see a little bit of the history of the Red Stone. We see a Rockwell assassinate a king who rose to power from the stone. When we return, we learn the events on the ship happened because of the Red Stone, and to reach William Rockwell, we'll need to retrieve 3 more stone plates like the one Arthur gives us.
Like this one here.
When we leave, we pick up the doorman's astral piece and move on to the next room. This room contains a crow, spots for all the plates, and the mean ghost lady on the floor above us. This room requires some thinking, or the guide in my case, but we have to use the gear on the back of the crow to distract the ghost lady long enough for us to run up the stairs and turn the light on. Skipping ahead a little bit, we find a boy who tells us there was a blood moon the night all this happened.
That midnight, the moon was stained blood red.
Next to him, we find a fisheye. We have to drain the pool we passed and wait for a full moon and insert the eye into the fish at the bottom of the pool. So we go below this deck to try to solve the pool drainage problem. In one of the rooms here, we use the gear to bring the parrot to life, allowing a servant ghost to pass on.
It moved! Oh, thank God!
Under the parrot, we find a broken plate we need. Interacting with it turns the parrot into a dickhead that makes us go get the proper plate. We're launched into a graveyard and have to solve a whole bunch of puzzles. When we reach the bottom of the crypt, we find the handiwork of William. On this body, we take the pendant and have to run past William. Along the way, we find the fish plate and use it to open a few gates so we can escape. Once we do, we're back on the ship and have the fixed plate in our inventory. Across the hall from this room, we find the angry ghost lady. When we give her the pendant, she passes on.
My pendant. Our lost memories.
This room also has the pump for the drainage pool. Inputting the correct sequence of valves and lever pulls, we eventually activate the pump and drain the pool. Returning back to the pool room, we place the eye in the fish, and the child flings us into a memory about the stone.
I'll tell you about the red stone. I know everything. It was written in that book.
We're now in a library, and while here we have to distract the librarians enough to move away from the box containing the book we need. Once they move, we retrieve the old book and return to the ship. This book tells us the red stone has the power to change destiny by making sacrifices, granting wealth and the power to rule kingdoms. It also states that the blue stone exists as its opposite. One rule is to never sacrifice too many lives to this stone, but no knowledge is known of what might happen if that rule is broken. But I think it's safe to assume that what's going on here is the outcome of that rule being broken. When we return to the Rockwell ghosts, we get a key to the kitchen, moving us into our next area.
This key.
We find a ghost here who's upset about his crew being dead below, so we go on an adventure to save them.
They haven't even realized that they've already died.
When we get off the elevator, we get snuck up on by the king who was assassinated by the Rockwells in the flashback. He slowly creeps up to us while trying to pull us towards him. Right as he's about to reach us, Henry comes and turns on the lights.
So you've come all this way. My soul has been uneasy ever since I sent you that letter. I'm no longer the same person I was when I first met that girl. The Red Stone. William, what have I come this far for?
After this weird monologue, we're left to wonder, is Dad really on our side? Now this part is a whole bunch of back and forth, so I'm going to just rattle off the ghosts we encounter and how to save them. There's a patrolman here who we save by setting off an alarm in another room to go get another ghost to relieve his shift.
Shut up. Oh no, I forgot. What are you doing? That demon could show up any time. I'm sorry. The telegraph. I'm going to get some rest now.
The telegraph he speaks of has instructions on how to use the telegraph to send a Morse code message in a little bit. In another room we find a ghost who needs locker 4 opened.
Clock should be written in locker 4.
Once locker 4 is opened, he gives a combination and then runs off.
The combination is 1, 6, 8, 9. Why won't it open?
When we meet up with him, we learn the combination is partly incorrect.
8, 9. The numbers should be right.
He input 1689, but we need to put it in upside down to be 6891. With that, the door unlocks and we can enter.
It finally opened. I must hurry.
Once we find the ghost inside this room, he moves a fallen pipe and passes on. We're then ambushed by the king ghost again, and escape by entering a side room. In here we can turn on the power to the level of the ship the patrolman was on. When we return and turn on the lights, he passes on. Eventually we find a ghost upset about hearing someone tapping the telegraph,
It's coming from the control room.
so we head over and set up the machine. Once that's done, we send C-R-E-A on the telegraph, and Krea's brother comes and gives us a music box before flinging us back in time to a church. Here we have to listen to the music box and play the notes on the piano, which is where the guide comes in handy again. After playing the piano, the altar moves and we go down to see Krea locked up. She tells us her grandfather stole the blue stone from her, and to give her brother an earring when we return. Honestly, this is the only downfall I can see in this game. Having random ghosts be voiced, but not an integral character, seems like a really big miss to me. But anyway, when we leave the past and return to the brother, we give him the earring, and he passes on and drops a plate for us. Now that it's quiet, the ghost across the hall passes on as well.
Finally rest.
Returning to the kitchen, the man is happy and passes on with a little salute and drops us our final plate. When we go to the door with the plates, we find Arthur and his wife waiting for us. When we insert all 4 plates, they both pass on.
Please, seal that stone forever.
Entering the store, we find the Rockwell's personal quarters. In one of the rooms here, we find Arthur's younger sister, who gives us a picture to give to her other brother, Jack.
Please, go see Jack.
When we give him the picture, he tells us to adjust the clock in the hallway so that we can enter Krea's room, and then passes on.
Room next door.
When we enter Krea's room, we see some pictures inside that gives us a little glimpse into the family's life. When we interact with the castle painting, we're thrown back to the castle from before. Here we can examine the king's body and receive the object to make his soul pass on. So we coax him out and give him the cameo, and we're finally free of him.
Eleanor, my daughter.
Entering the room he came out of, we find William, and he tells us about his time with the Red Stone.
Instant I held the red stone,
We then witness a memory of Kreia, which doesn't end very well. William tells us the Redstone has taken over our father's mind. We're then thrown back into the memory when Kreia was just killed and have to adjust the course of history. We do this by taking the bullet, which changes the whole scene we just saw of Kreia and the Hitman. When we try to leave, we see the Hitman had backup. Now that we have the other half of the blue stone, we're now back in the ship with William's body and the key to the engine room. On our way to the engine room, Arthur's sister passes on, giving us our final astral piece. When we return to the creepy guy, we hand in the remaining astral pieces and learn that these astral pieces are used to make a second red stone.
Greatest treasure this stone belongs to you. We shall meet again when your fate with the other red stone comes to an end. When that time comes...
Now that all the ghosts are freed, it's time for us to face our father. Entering the back of the engine room, he has a nice monologue about his red stone before he dies, and William's ghost chases us.
Now, Richard. I realized it the moment I killed William and got hold of the red stone. I had the strongest desire for this power all along. I will become one with this power. The blue stone, even it shall succumb to my powers in this darkness. There is no light here. Not even you or your blue stone will survive.
This sequence is relatively straightforward but a little tricky. We have to run from the ghost while looking on the ground for a valve that we can then use to pressurize the engine. We do this twice, and then retrieve the piston key. Once we override both pistons, we return to the red stone and destroy it with our blue stone.
The power to change destiny. Gone. Forever. This place won't last long. Hurry. Run to the front of the ship.
With both stones destroyed, we have 90 seconds to make it to the front of the ship and escape. How we choose to escape decides our endings. Our first ending is to wait out the timer and watch as the ship vanishes into light with us on board. All three other endings also contain this scene, so I'll be removing them going forward. Our second ending comes from following Kreia to the helm.
This ship will disappear soon. You are not supposed to be here. Go home now. Everything is over.
Our last two endings come from finding the creepy astral peace guy.
I told you that I would come, didn't I, Richard? Behold, you stand before the most omnipotent power man has ever witnessed. The power to shape your fate to your desire with your very own hands.
He offers us our own redstone dagger. If we take the dagger, then go to Kreia, this is the ending we get.
Richard, I wonder what you'll wish for. I can hardly wait.
This ship's life is coming to an end. Come. This ship will disappear soon. You are not supposed to be here. Go home now. Everything is over.
Our final ending comes from refusing to take the dagger and just going straight to Kreia.
Strange. You are indeed a strange man. It is goodbye, then. I pray that you have a bright future ahead of you.
This ship will disappear soon. You are not supposed to be here. Go home now. Everything is over.
Although the graphics of this game are a little dated, and the pacing was very slow, it was still an incredible experience. The amount of time spent playing was perfect. It wasn't too long, it wasn't too short, it was just right. This felt like an actual fleshed out and thought through ghost story, from all the ghosts being victims of the Redstone Dagger either directly or secondhand, and the ones who were victims outside of the ship being there in the form of a vengeful spirit was a nice touch. By the time I had reached Henry, I had honestly forgotten this was about finding him because I was so invested in saving all the ghosts. Now, the very first game I ever played on PlayStation 1 was Final Fantasy IX, and that game hooked me for months as a kid. I had to explore everything thoroughly, and this game honestly gave me that same feel, like exploration was necessary and rewarding. From finding pictures that gave glimpses into how Krea's life might have been, and getting little bits of story from all the ghosts I saved along the way. The sense of melancholy and the little bit of dread that was there worked out very well, even by today's standards. Now let's move on to the second entry in the series. Now the gameplay of this is exactly the same, so I'm only going to be touching on story aspects here. A year later, Echo Knight 2, The Lord of Nightmares, or Nemori no Shihaisha, was released as a Japan-only exclusive, but eventually received a fan translation in 2015, which I gotta say was pretty damn good. The translation still has its original Japanese voice actors, which to me always hits better than a dubbed actor. Other than that, this game plays the exact same as its predecessor. Same controls, same gameplay, same astral pieces. This game is not a direct sequel or continuation, but we still control a protagonist named Richard Osmond, with no mention of anything from the previous game, so it's safe to assume this takes place in a separate timeline from the first Echo Knight. As far as changes to the game go, the biggest addition that was added was a compass to help orient the players around the huge mansion, a map, candles, and an oil lantern so we can light up areas that might not have light switches. Our game starts with another Richard Osmond going to a college library to find his missing girlfriend Christina, after the police investigation into her disappearance led nowhere. When we arrive at the college, we have a quick internal monologue before this crazy face just pops out of this window. I'm gonna pause real quick here. I don't want to call this a jump scare, but it both scared me and made me laugh hysterically when it happened, and for the rest of the cutscene I was just cracking up. Like, where the hell is this guy actually peeking out of? Anyway, we get inside and follow our friend Kent to the library, as he tells us he really shouldn't be doing this, but he supports us anyway. When inside, we mess around for a little bit before we find a book with a girl who looks exactly like Christina. But according to the book, this girl is Jessica Clancy. So we head over to the Clancy estate, since we assume Christina found out that was her birth family. We get a cutscene of a lady and a man talking, and the man says he has but one wish before shooting the lady right in the noggin. When we wake up, we're in a room somewhere, and our buddy here says he saved us. He found us in the woods and carried us here. His name is Brian, and honestly, he's the best character in the whole game. When we go to leave, he says it's dark in the mansion, and we need to find a way to turn the lights on. When we meet up with him, he says the power to the distribution box has been cut. In a nearby room is where we encounter our first ghost, a Neko Knight 2. These ghosts can only be seen when there's a light in their general area, which came back to bite me in the ass while I was following this game facts guide, as you'll see a little bit later in the game as well. The ghosts act the same in this entry. Helping them pass on drops an astral piece just like before. When we free our first one, the same redhead who just got shot shows up, saying everyone here is dead and they can't pass on until someone helps them, and she wonders if we're up to it. She tells us to make our way out to the garden because the man who did this should still be there. When we return to Brian and turn the power on in the box, we get snuck up on by our first mean ghost, and Brian, like a real G, tries to shoot the thing before running away. But since we're Richard 2.0, we're smart and we just turn the lights on. When Brian comes back out, he says he's out of here and runs off. Following him again, we're ambushed by the same ghost before Brian yeets himself over the railing and runs to the front door. But sadly it's locked, and the little girl gets him. R.I.P. Brian. Here the bad ghost acts a little differently. They can clip through anything in their way, which makes the chases a little more lively. When we turn on the lights and go check on Brian, we see he's not doing too hot. When we mosey into the west wing of the mansion, we find a newspaper which flings us into a memory of a blimp taking off. When we're inside, we have to find a little stuffed bear and give it to the young girl inside. Once that's done, we learn that the little girl's sister, Jessica, wasn't on board the blimp, which was probably for the best.
先生もそう言ってただろ。この子たちの人生にはまだまだ時間があるんだよ。悲観しちゃいけない。
そうね。今度来るときはきっと4人揃って。
ああ、そうしよ
う。お船から煙が出てる。
When we're back at the mansion and read the newspaper, we learn the names of those on the blimp. Robert, Helena, and Rebecca Morgan. Now, is it just a coincidence the young girl's name was Jessica? We'll see. Further along in this wing, we get another music puzzle, except this one is way worse. We have to listen to a song in the bar that had the newspaper in it, then come back here and write actual sheet music for the missing notes. Eventually we get it right, and the lady's partner comes in before they both pass on, and the redhead lady comes back in. When we make it to the garden she was talking about earlier, we see a mean ghost send her dog after us. We escape by interacting with the gravestone behind us. We're flung back to the young girl looking for her dog Dino. We have to solve a weird puzzle to rescue the dog in the basement of the shed nearby. But when we do, we find the young girl on the ground bleeding vaguely similar to how Arthur and his wife were in the first game. She gives us her pendant before she dies, and we're flung back to the present. The same scene plays out before us, the young ghost and the dog, so we run past the dog and give the necklace to the ghost to make her disappear. Inside a secret room, we find that ghost girl's diary. Her name was Karen Clancy. She writes in it that she wants to keep this room hidden from her brother Albert. It also states that Jessica is sick, no one's allowed to see her, and the doctors haven't stopped by lately. As we stumble around, we make our way to the central courtyard, which is accessed by the east wing of the mansion. Here we're greeted by an absolute buffoon of a man. As we follow him, he locks a door behind him and asks us to open a door, which is a little fishy to me. But instead, we try to steal his lantern, which somehow distracts him from his little assassination attempt. But as time passes on, we see our boy Brian floating down the river. When we examine the body, the buffoon boy comes back. He says Albert told him to keep the mansion clear so he can protect Jessica. This time he has a pistol, so we have to run away while he pops off at us. We solve a couple puzzles to turn the water in the greenhouse on, and he runs away because his lantern goes out. When he leaves, he drops the crank for the door he asked us to open. When we use it, a boat falls into the water, dropping Christina's handkerchief, and we're launched into a flashback. Here we see that Christina doesn't remember her childhood, but she does remember having a friend around the same age who she'd play with every day. Another coincidence? I'll let you decide. But we take the boat over to the ruins and have to play dress up as every ghost here by taking their lab coats and pretending to be them while talking to the other ghosts to get a bit more lore and get them to move on. We learned this area was of religious or ritualistic importance to the people before, and they had their own redstone dagger, or soul dagger in this game, and that by sacrificing humans, they could achieve immortality. Interacting with one of the ghosts outside, we're flung into a cave that eventually caves in. We race to the end to try to save Franco, but we don't make it because he's obsessed with trying to figure out some device. We're then flung out as it caves in and learn Franco didn't make it. But we can go back in and figure out what Franco was doing. When we do, we learn he was obsessed over a door that he couldn't open. We take the heart from this door and head over to the Tower of Grief to retrieve the other heart we need. We grab that one, and then head back to Franco's door to open it with the second heart. Inside we have to light some candles in a certain order to retrieve a chalice. When we go back to the Tower of Grief, we put in Franco's heartstone and go to the roof of the tower. Here we find a slate on the ground. Interacting with it brings us into a flashback. In this flashback, we see a lady asking Albert about the chalice we got, but he lied about having it and then kills the woman with the soul stone. After this dialogue, we can safely assume the red-headed woman told him that the soul stone would save Jessica. When we're done the flashback, the slate floats away, and the woman who just died attacks us. but we give her the chalice and receive the slate.
父さんの夢やっと手に入れた。
Using the slate below moves a walkway that leads us into a room with a coffin in it. Inside the coffin is a mummified woman. Someone then says something about two souls becoming one before we see Albert himself walk in.
紅の光は導く。不滅なる死とともに永遠の生を。この塔を作った古の民の伝承だ。よくここまで来た。私はアルバート・クランシー、この館の主だ。君はリチャード君だね。恋人を探してここまで来た。返すわけにはいかない。私には彼女が必要なんだ。
He knows we're here looking for Christina, but we can't save her. He says he also knows her name is Rebecca Morgan, so we now have confirmation that she survived the blimp crash.
分かたれた命とは双子を意味する。双子の魂が一つになる。そうすれば永遠の命が手に入る。ジョージ、彼を
We're then snatched by the buffoon George and can't move.
今度は逃がさないからね。君と私は同じだ。愛する者のために何かをなそうとする。だが、私もジェシカを見捨てるわけ。
He then sprays us in the face with Dior for Men, and we pass out. When we wake up, we're in a cell being watched by George. He then steals all the stuff we had in our bag. This is the point in the game that ruined my chances at getting the second ending, because he takes our lantern, and the guide I used had a ghost at the very end that needed that lantern. So if you ever want to play this game and use a guide, don't use this GameFAQs walkthrough right here, because it absolutely sucked. But while we're in here, let's fuck with George and try to break the bed a couple times. Eventually he's had it with us and gets hungry and walks away. The guide said to break the bed and wait at this point, so I stood here for 40 actual minutes before realizing I had to grab the stuff out of my bag and then wait for him to come back. But when George returns, he sees we broke the bed and comes in to fix it. But we're slick and lock him in now. But George is strong as hell and just bashes the door down like a caveman and chases us. At the end of this segment, we reach a dead end, and George comes barreling through a door and actually drowns himself. This dude is actually dumb as a box of rocks. So we hop on the door and use it as a raft. When we reach the end of the river, we're in the basement of the mansion. Here we meet the redhead again, and she's surprised we're alive. Which honestly, if George didn't have two brain cells fighting for third place, we definitely wouldn't be. We then learn she is indeed responsible for Albert having the dagger and using it to try to save Jessica. In the book she was reading, we learn that the stone grants immortality, but half of the user's soul must be given up, which is why Christina, or Rebecca, is here, to give the other half of her soul to Jessica since they're twins. As we continue on our adventure, we find an old lady ghost upset about a flower not blooming, and go into a flashback, Here we see her happy that the flower has bloomed for Albert. This lady turns out to be Albert's grandmother. When we get her some compost, the flower blooms, and she says it will bring Albert back to how he was, and that the red-headed lady tempted him into all of this. In another room we find Albert's mom, who says Jessica changed Albert. He truly loved her and would sacrifice anything for her. In her flashback, we see Jessica sick in bed and Albert by her side, saying he will find a cure no matter the price. You know what? I kind of see where he's coming from, but he definitely went way too far by just straight up sacrificing everyone in the house. The mom says only Jessica can stop Albert, and we need to wake her. When we go into a mask room, we have to hide from Albert until he leaves his room with dagger in hand. When he leaves, we go into his room and find a little arm sticking out from under his bed. This arm has a, wait for it, a pine cone, but sadly, not a hairy one. When we go into this room in the present, we flip a switch which drops a secret staircase to the roof. When we try to leave, surprise, it's the redhead again. This time, she tells us to hurry. When we go to the roof, there's a really strong breeze that comes in waves. I ended up going the wrong way, so I just jumped off the roof to start over. When we get to the other side, we find a library, which has Albert's grandpa in it. He thinks we're Albert, and he tasks us with placing books on a shelf. Each time we return, we're viewed as an older Albert, being told to learn responsibility for becoming head of the household, and not to enter the back room. These books give us a little bit of backstory on the family in ruins, but nothing too major. Just that the Clancy family came over as British nobility, and that the ruins prophesize a blood moon to fall under the star sign of Scorpio. I always knew they couldn't be trusted. But once we complete these trips, Gramps recognizes we're not Albert, stating he'll never forgive him, but he allows us to enter the back room. Also, by not following this guide, I was not able to free Grandpa, so sorry Gramps, you're stuck. When we reach Albert, he says he needs Christina, and there's nothing we can do to stop him. In a flashback, we see the red-headed lady, who's probably a Scorpio too, come in and tell Albert Christina must be sacrificed under the red moon and that Jessica can survive in the coffin until then.
いつまで待てばいいんだ。ジェシカはもう長くない。
必要なものは2つよ。あなたはその1つを手に入れただけ。見なさい、月よ。あの月が赤く染まる。それが儀式の合図。その時こそ双子の姉であるクリスティーナの命を石に注ぎなさい。機会は一度だけ。だけどそう先のことではないわ。
一体それはいつだ。もうこれ以上待ってなどいられるか。
安心して。ジェシカさんはあの棺の中よ。しばらくは持つわ。
She then drops an item to open the coffin, which we snag instead and go release Jessica. On our way over there, we see Brian's ghost and we free him. We finally free my guy. I'm so sorry.
いない。そうか。もうあいつらはいないのか。助かった。
When we release Jessica, she's no longer a mummy. She knows the red-headed lady did all of this, and that Christina is in the clock tower. We make our way to the clock tower too, and see Alberto as he's entering as well.
君の努力は認めよう。だが、それが報われることはない。見えるだろう。赤く染まったあの月が。ついに時が来たんだ。
We sneak around back and take a different path up the tower than Albert does. As we make our way up, Albert tries shooting at us, so we have to zig and zag to avoid getting hit during this whole sequence. When we reach the top, we can turn around and see the red moon, meaning we're not too late. Entering the room, we find Christina locked up in a cage. She tells us to hurry because Albert's gone mad. And just then, he shoots us.
言ったはずだ。彼女は渡さない。邪魔をするなら死んでもらうしかない。
リチャード!
But not so fast. Another shot goes off, and we see Albert fall at Jessica's hand.
Jessica, なぜここに？
アルバート、もうやめて。
ジェシカ、私は怖かったんだ。
アルバート、
母と同じ。君が消えていく。
もう何？
一人だけ、私だけ。 する。
Our adventure's now over. 3 years later, we learn Jessica died alongside Albert. And we're now married to Christina. Now I think there's a Mandela effect going on in my brain right now, because when I was playing this, I swore it said that they named their kids Albert and Jessica. But I guess I was wrong. This game felt like a more fleshed out and less experimental version of the first. My only complaint was the length. It was much longer. It took me almost twice as long as the first one to beat, even though there was the same amount of ghosts. And I think that was due to the pacing in the large map, which has sometimes had you go all the way from the west wing, all the way over to the east wing, which could take about 5 or 6 minutes. But other than that, no real differences from the first game. I think this was super well done, and I hope you guys can see the connections to Amnesia, like being safe in the light and having to find random items scattered around to help you progress. I also did play the third one, but I plan on doing that in a different video since it didn't really fit the same narrative and vibe as these two. It was for PlayStation 2 and played a little bit differently, so I'll be doing a separate video on that. But until then, I just want to thank all my Patreon supporters and all of you for watching. Be sure to like the video and stick around for some more, and I'll see you guys next time.